to do that. And so I just came to really enjoy and love and appreciate those meetings and the way Chris ran them. And even though we're doing it online, I really do hope we can have some of that same dynamic. And part of that is because, as Chris has said, I've been really thinking a lot and working a lot with some other organizations on how we could have a more holistic approach to really creating a servant leadership culture in organizations. So, I have some things in mind that I think work and will work, but I'm really anxious to hear from you and to let those ideas be sharpened a little bit by your real world experience and feedback. So I don't want to just say today, I welcome your feedback. I want to say I crave it because, one of the little sayings we have is that any good idea can become a better idea when it's subjected to robust dialogue. So, I'm going to throw out some things to you, but I really would like to hear your feedback or comments in the chat. I've got the chat box open, so if you don't want to comment, you just want to write, that's fine too. So let me start with this thought. It's Peter Drucker that is credited with the saying, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." And I don't really know if Drucker really said that or if it's just a legend, but regardless of who really said it, I think all of us that work with organizations kind of shake our head and go, yeah, that's true. Because if we can have great strategies, we can have great programs, but if our culture is toxic or not healthy, or if it's just uncertain and unstabilized, it just seems like things don't get done or we just spin our wheels. So, several years ago, way back in 2014, we started teaching on creating a servant leadership culture. And we still do that. In fact, it's after having a little bit of a hiatus during the pandemic, it's come back stronger than ever. A lot more organizations wanting us to do it in some form or fashion. What I've and so I believe that the best way, if you were to say, Mike, how do we start? Where do we start? We want to transform our organization. I think the best thing to do is still start with a full day workshop with SGR on what is a servant leadership culture, where we talk about those 12 principles and how we create it. And that everybody that the organization wants to be there could be there for that. And we've done that with as many as 130 in the room and with as few as 12 in the room. But ideally, it should start with department heads, the city manager's office, assistant department heads for sure. I think managers and supervisors under that, but that becomes kind of a decision for the organization. But then following that becomes the question of kind of like, what next? What next? And I think sometimes at SGRs, we've kind of tried to help organizations. We've tried to be flexible, but I think sometimes in being flexible, we haven't given them as much real clear direction as is helpful. So one of the things that I've come to kind of believe is that having started with that and working number two on your systems, how does servant leadership impact, just like Ron writes about in his book, if you've read it, how does it impact brand management, recruiting, the interviewing and hiring process, the onboarding process, the development of your team, coaching? That needs to start being worked on. And at the same time, and here are some of the things we haven't been as explicit about, I think the next thing to do, and the most important thing to do, is to start working with those mid-level supervisors on what servant leadership looks like for a supervisor. And so we've been going through this process of really shaping and reshaping those classes so that they're very specific about what servant leadership looks like for a supervisor. And so right now we've got them in two series, both series 1 and series 2. Both series have 6 classes, so there are 12 classes altogether. They're 2-hour classes. Whereas we used to do 4-hour classes, we figured out that it works better to do 2-hour classes, or we can do them online, in which case we do them in 90 minutes. So I think both are effective. But I think that's really the most important. And I want to say this, and then I want to stop and get your feedback on it. My observation in working with lots and lots of organizations is that it's the supervisor, it's that mid-level supervisor that determines, if I can use this term, the tranquility of the organization. And I'm guessing you feel the same way as HR, and I want to get your feedback. And here's why I think it is. Because that person, she has one foot in management and one foot in, let's say, execution all the time. That's their job, that's their life. And often they feel like one or both of those groups are unhappy with them. Management feels like they're too easy on employees. Employees feel like you always side with management, and so back and forth. And my observation is that the supervisor's ability to navigate that tension without either imploding on themselves or exploding on the rest of the organization has a huge impact on the tranquility and therefore the effectiveness and efficiency of the organization. So I've started thinking, and have thought this way for a long time, if you just have limited amount of training dollars, I would put everything I could into supervisory training, both for about servant leadership and practices. So let me stop and unmute yourself or use the chat box, either one, and give me your feedback on that. What is your sense on that? Do you feel like that's on bait, on target, off target? And again, I don't just welcome that, I really crave it. So talk to me a little bit about it from your perspectives.
Mike, I'd like to ask you, what organizations have you seen kind of go through some of this process, and what was their outcome? Like, how did it work for them?
Yeah. So I think the city of Richland, Washington really comes to mind as a group that's really pushed that forward a lot. They haven't necessarily done the same classes that I would do, but of course that's the genius of local government, decision making, is they're the ones that are really on the ground and know. But I think what it's done is it's really helped those supervisors to feel supported and to feel integral to the mission of the organization. Grapevine has gone at it a little different way for many years. They have had what's called, they call it NGL, Next Generation Leadership. Other groups have called it a Leadership Academy, Emerging Leaders. But what they have done is taken some of these big principles on leadership, and they have really taught it over and over, about 20 people at a time for 10 months. And, by the time you've done that 10 years, you've put 200 plus people through that. And that's been paired with a strong mentoring program. So that has, I think, really what I've noticed about that's been so effective is that it's moved over time from being, oh, we need to call finance about this, to we need to call Rachel, who works in finance. They knew her, or instead of we need to talk to Parks and Rec, they would say, oh, we need to call Jack. Jack works in Parks and Rec. So it just gave relational development, and that created more, I'm going to say, so just it made things easier to work with. So that's a couple of organizations that we've seen do that.
Awesome. And I saw, I'm going to pick on people because I see some familiar names here. So Morgan, if you can unmute yourself, will you talk to us a little bit about what you all are doing? Because I know a little bit, probably just scratching the surface, but I'd love for you to speak to some of the organizational development programs you all are offering right now, if possible.
But we may have to change a setting on this if they're not able to unmute themselves.
No, I think they are.
Okay,
Can y'all hear me?
there we go. Go, Morgan.
Hi, Morgan.
Hi.
Hi, y'all. I'm with the City of New Braunfels, our HR team. I'm the Learning and Development Coordinator. Um, yeah, I mean, some of the programs that we're currently working on are a lot of just leadership development programs, trying to work on the soft skill development for our mid-level managers. So some of that same group you were speaking about there, Mike, and helping promote connections and networking amongst that group, but also giving them tools in their toolbox that they can utilize for, communication, having difficult conversations, being adaptable and flexible, topics like that. So we're trying to hit both those things. We're giving them those tools, but then also trying to help them network so that they have connections across the organization with other folks in similar managerial roles in other departments. So they have folks to call on when they have challenges coming up. They're not isolated in those challenges, and other folks may be facing similar things. So that's one of the programs that I help coordinate.
Yeah, I think that's really good, Morgan. And I think sometimes what I hear supervisors saying is they feel like they're failing because there's tension. And I think that probably, I mean, it could be too much, but probably that tension is actually a sign that they're being very effective and successful.
That's one of the questions that I was going to ask also, Mike. How do you measure success for something like that? Like, what are some of those like metrics or key things that you would look for to know if it was successful?
Well, I think there's several that come to mind, but one is, you need SMART goals. And so you can really measure, are we accomplishing our goals? Are our objectives for our department being accomplished? Are we moving the ball down the field, so to speak? But second is, turnover rates, because you can really succeed in getting things done for a period of time, but if people are constantly leaving, that's a sign of, concern. I think a third one that, people don't put as much focus on is, are we developing leaders underneath us? Jack Welch, who has plenty of flaws, may I'm not necessarily holding him up as the icon of leadership development, but he did say some really good things about leadership. And one of them was, he said, one day you become a leader. Until that day, development or success is all about developing yourself. But the day you become a leader, and we could transfer the word, supervisor, develop or success is all about developing others. So I think that's a measure. What's the pipeline look like? That's why I go back to Grapevine as an example. They've done really well with that. So I think those are a couple of things I would say are really good. Do you have, good, clear goals? Is your turnover at a rate that seems right, not out of control? And then can you point to leaders that you're developing overall? Those are things I think are really good. I think too, you mentioned them, Morgan, and it's so true. How do I as a team member judge whether my supervisor is a good? It comes down to things like, how do they run a meeting? Does the meeting run well? Which I know that's so mechanical, but if you're a supervisor and you're leading really lousy meetings, people are not going to look to you as a leader as much. So knowing how to run those meetings is important. Communication. Do I communicate clearly? Do I communicate with everybody that needs to be communicated with on settings? And do I follow the basics on it? And then, conflict. How do I handle conflict? Because that's going to come up. those are things are really important. I think, you know, we like to use this little acrostic, MITS, MITTS, as a way to teach an easy, you know, I mean, it's maybe too easy, but as a template for what supervisors have to do. And the M stands for motivate. You have to be relational enough and know what really matters to each person on that team. So motivation is important. You need to know the theories of motivation so you can try them and not just think that what motivates you is what motivates everybody else. The I stands for inspect. You have to be an inspector, and you can't let work to go out that's not, you know, supervised. You have to do that without being a micromanager. And then a T, the first T stands for troubleshooter. While you don't want to always be in the weeds, you have to have enough expertise that when something's wrong, you can jump in and help them figure out how to move forward. The T is, of course, my favorite, which is you've got to be a teacher. You've got to, if you can't teach people how to do it, then you're going to be always the one that's got to do it. So you have to teach people. And then the S stands for structure, that you have to structure the work as a supervisor. You have to say who's going to do what with what resources and timetable and all those things. Those are the big functions that you've got to provide as a supervisor.
I think, Mike, one of the things that it's something that you've said in the past and it really resonated with me, but was about role modeling, you know, being a lifelong learner and role modeling that, because I think it kind of goes back to what Fallon was saying in the comments, but it's, you know, it's easy to get, you know, or actually Jonathan said something too, but it's easy to not make that a priority for yourself, you know, and you might want your employees to make that a priority, but you forget to make that a priority for yourself. But it, you know, I think it means more when you're role modeling that too, as a supervisor and a leader.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. You know, that's why all of the material on self-awareness and self-development, being a lifelong learner, is so crucial, because people buy into the person before they buy into the program. And if you're not a credible person that's trustworthy, that's competent, that is inspiring, forward thinking, honest, you can't really lead effectively for very long. You can have a little reign of terror, but that's not going to be sustainable. So you really have to model that, learn. And, you know, I think, you know, that's again, I'm talking about the difficulty for a supervisor. You have to, on the one hand, demonstrate, hey, I am the boss. I'm the boss, you know, while at the same time demonstrating humility that I'm also a learner, and that this whole team matters. So I think that's, you know, really important to keep focused on. Model the way. You know, Kouzes and Posner talks about that in their book. Model the way, inspire a shared vision, challenge the status quo, like push forward and say, why are we saying it can't be done any different than that? Enable others to act, make decisions that need to be made, clear the obstacles with higher ups or whatever it is. And then the last E is encourage the heart. All of those things, boy, as a supervisor, you got to do. And here's the thing that I'm seeing too, is that so many times we confuse being an extrovert with being a good leader. And just because you're an extrovert does not mean you are a good leader. You can be an extrovert and be a good leader. You can be an extrovert and be a really bad leader. And we have to teach these behaviors. They're learned behaviors, but I don't think any of us learn them naturally. We may be extroverted naturally. We may be kind of a charismatic person naturally. That's not the same as being a good supervisor or boss. So that's my thought.
Interesting. I think that's a topic like for debate in the future, Mike, because I like that. You know, thinking through, like, are you born with leadership ability or is it something you learn? I think that's a great conversation. But Fallon has a good question also that I want to ask. How do you communicate cross-training and succession plans are not threats to department heads that someone else will take their position?
Yeah, I think that's always that tough topic. I go back to, when I first started with SGR, the first thing we ever started teaching in workshop stuff was the book and the workshop by Patrick Lencioni on overcoming the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which is kind of a misnomer if you're familiar with it, because he's not saying, oh, this team's dysfunctional. He's saying every team has to overcome these things because they're made up of human beings. So when we first started doing it, I ran into a lot of opposition from department heads, because one of the main things of that workshop and the book is that you want to make the team that you're on your A team, and the team that you lead your B team, which seems counterintuitive, because if you're a department head, for example, you're spending a lot more time with the team that you lead than you are with the team that you're on. So I got a lot of pushback in those early days, and I was still trying to get my footing in this world, and like, well, is that right? And so what I came to understand was, because people would say to me, the finance director, or not finance director, let's say Parks and Rec, if I'm a police chief, for example, Parks and Rec director is not my teammate. He's my competitor, because we're both competing for limited amounts of budget money. So I'm like, sort through that. Like, well, is that right? And obviously these are successful men and women, or they wouldn't be where they were. And so eventually where I landed was, okay, I get that works, but maybe there's a better way, which is to say we are teammates. And I think that's important, because once you establish that the team that I'm on is my A team, the team that I lead is my B team, then you're looking at it as for what's best for the whole organization. And you're realizing, as I develop people, those leaders are not going to take my place. They're going to be more effective at where they are. And someday when I retire or move on to some better job I found on the SGR job board, then they're going to be prepared. And I will have developed a reputation, a legitimate reputation, for being able to develop leaders. So, one of my beliefs is that we ought to lead in a way that will inspire others to lead also. Leaders are not people who get followers. Leaders are people who develop other leaders. And as long as you can be somebody that can develop other leaders, there will always be a place for you in a good organization. And that's I know sometimes there's some fear of that, and some fear of, well, what if I develop these leaders and then somebody in another department grabs them? Sometimes that will happen. But if you're, again, seeing the whole team, it's for the good. I can think of some places where I've seen that happen. But most of the time, that's not going to happen, because you're developing them, you're expanding their skills, and they'll appreciate that.
Yeah, it seems like maybe one of the most crucial strengths or skill sets that someone could offer an organization is the ability to develop others, or see potential in others and help them develop. But I don't know, Fallon, did that answer your question? Yes. Okay. Awesome. What else? I want to hear from other people. Jonathan, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. I was thinking with what Fallon said, so I'm a mid-level manager, I guess. And I think to what Mike was speaking to, it's easy for me to train and develop my supervisors and managers, because the more that they can take off my plate, the more I can take off of my director's plate. But I think to what Fallon was saying is there can be that insecurity, likely, of if you've reached possibly the ceiling in your organization, do you want to train others to take your place or not? And I think that is a fair concern, but I think especially to what Mike was saying, that's really what we want. If someone can do my job better than me and they're a better fit at my organization than I am, in the best interest of my organization, do I owe it to them and to that staff to help them take my place and me go on somewhere else? I think we have to look at it from an organizational standpoint. What's in the best interest of our organization, as opposed to what's in the best interest of my current position or current state.
That's a great point, Jonathan. And I will say, of course, I'm an old guy, so I've seen it up and down. But one of the quotes that I remember from one of Kouzes and Posner's other books, Encouraging the Heart, really, really has impacted my life. And the quote is, really believe in your heart of hearts that your purpose is to enlarge the lives of others, and you'll discover that your life is enlarged as well. And so while I don't want to be dismissive of that anxiety, I would just say my observation over years is somebody that can develop other people. You're so rare. You're so rare that people will find a place for you, even if it's not the position you're in. There'll be a place, because, man, if you can develop people, then you multiply the capacity of the organization. And any good leader, city manager, ACM, director, is going to recognize that and value that for sure. I think that one of the things I see when we teach classes on delegation, and a lot of times I've heard people say, in great organizations, they'll say, it's just easier to do it myself, which of course for a while it is, but then the work keeps expanding, and learning to see delegation as a method of developing others is really crucial. So if you always do it for them, how are they going to know? And that's one of the things I see where we get confused about servant leadership, because we think, well, a servant leader, that I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. I'm not afraid to do what I'm asking others to do. And I get that. That's admirable. And there's times when that really matters. But being a servant leader doesn't mean I go do everybody else's job for them. That's not really true. A servant leader is trying to do what's best for others, which is not to make them lazy, So, and I also hear leaders say this, well, they do reverse delegation. They'll look at the people that are working for them and they'll say, what can I take off of your plate? And I'll take it back on my plate because you're so busy. I appreciate the honor, the good spirit that is, but it's not the right way to go. Delegation is so that your plate can be free, so that you can have more freedom to, like you just said, Jonathan, take things off of your supervisor's plate. But you can help people prioritize. But the long-term answer isn't that I take things off of my subordinate's plate so that they won't have so much on their plate. You got to prioritize it, change the timeline maybe, but delegation is a way for them to grow and for you to have freedom, and having the courage to do that and the fortitude to stand with it really is the difference between good and great.
I think that's one of my favorite messages, Mike, and it reminds me a lot of Ron's opening session at the Servant Leadership Conference, which I'll drop a link to that in the chat too, in case other people want to watch it. But and Randy Mayu is the one who originally said this to me, gosh, I don't know, 20 years ago, maybe. But it stuck with me so much. But he said, don't ever let the actions of someone else affect the actions that you take, or something, don't ever let somebody else change who you are. Right. And I think it kind of goes back to that point of if we're all focused on being the best versions of ourselves, no matter what other people are doing, then we're all encouraging each other, and focusing on being good people first and foremost.
Right. Let me change gears for just a second. And Crystal, I don't want to take too much time here, but there's another tool that we've started using in just a couple of places that I'd really like to just make mention of because I'm really excited about the potential with this tool. We've partnered with a group and we have these lessons that we call roundtables. And, roundtables can be for anybody in the organization. So department heads, city manager's office, anybody. But they're probably a little bit more originally targeted towards the lower half of your organization. And here's why I'm excited about it. Because what I hear lots of times about our more, entry level frontline workers, sometimes those that are doing, pretty granular and maybe not so glamorous tasks, is that the basics of great, the foundational elements of having a great working career, maybe you're missing. Maybe some things like time management, honesty, just work ethic, relational, being able to get along with the other men and women that are on the crew, those kind of things. And things that maybe in the past we felt like were ingrained in people from the very beginning. Workers are coming to us and those are less developed in some cases. So roundtables helps develop character in a way that doesn't seem heavy-handed or cheesy. And I'm going to kind of walk you through how it works, and you're going to go, that's cheesy. But I'm going to tell you, we've seen it be really effective. Each lesson, you have about somewhere between 8 and 10 lessons in a topic. So maybe this topic is on, let's say, character. And, maybe one of those is on communication, and one of them is on time management, work ethic, etc. Each week, they'll have about a page and a half of an essay that's really well written about, let's say, whatever that topic is, say time management. And the supervisor or the team leader leads the discussion. And maybe this is really well done over a lunch break. So you have about an hour. And if you have an hour, you can do up to about 10 people. If you have 5 people, you can do it in 30 minutes. We don't recommend more than 10 at a time because it gets too long. And as silly as this sounds, you take turns reading out loud the article. The article's not hard. It's written on a 4th, 5th grade level. But, sometimes you'll have people that aren't natural born or natural English speakers. And so you kind of have to accommodate it however you need to. But you read it through and then they answer questions. And it's about like, how am I doing on this? What would it look like to be really good at it? Who do I know that's really good at it? What do I want to work on this week to get better at it? And the group goes around and talks about it. What's amazing, and we've done this a few times, is that these, sometimes rough and tumble men and women start bonding together around character development. And you might think that people would be like, oh, we don't want to do that. But that's really not the way we experience it. So then when they come back the next week, they've got a new topic. Say this time the topic is on communication. And you got another page and a half article that, we supply through the roundtables. But before they start that, they go through and say, well, Mike, you said last week that you needed to do this on time management. How would you grade yourself? Well, maybe I'll give myself a 7 because I did this. Okay, everybody goes around. So it's got some accountability with not too much accountability. And I'm really excited about this. And the way we've done it, the way we see our role in it, is that we would run it first with a group of supervisors so that we train the supervisors, we take them through it. And in the process, we're training them how to do it. And after they have gone through it, then they would lead their own teams and we can be as consultants. And also, this is, if you're interested in knowing more about it, send me a text or an email and I'll be glad to talk with you about it more in person. I don't want to come across too heavy-handed about it, but I've been really impressed with the usefulness of this. And it gives me a lot of hope for developing some of those foundational, this is building foundational blocks for a man or a woman's successful career. Because if they can't get these things down, we all know that their career is going to have a quick ceiling. And maybe we end up kind of plowing around them. But boy, what if they could get really, good at these things and these became important to them, and that's what your organization was talking about. So in an ideal world, I would encourage an organization to think about doing these twice a year. Do 10 weeks in the spring, 10 weeks in the fall. And so it'd be something kind of people are looking forward to, and they do, and then you move on. And it's not that costly. This is a really efficient way to do some leadership development with everyone in the organization, whether they are leading somebody or not, because the first person you got to lead is yourself. And that's what this teaches on. So that's my little thought there. But that's a big part of where I've been thinking about is, how do you develop those upper leaders? How do you develop those mid-level folks? And how do you develop everybody, even if they're not supervising somebody?
Is that the program, Mike, that Broken Arrow did?
Yes. Broken
Okay.
Arrows, their water, part of their water department did it, and they had great success at it. And then a group from Little Elm and their public works department did it as well, and they loved it too.
That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I want to open it up for questions one more time, and then I have one more question because I promised, you all don't know this, but I promised Mike that I would try to stump him with questions because I did not tell him anything that I would ask him today. So that makes it more fun because I could try to catch him off guard. So if you have really hard ones, help me out here, people.
I can always say, I don't know.
It's harder to do than you think. I'm just saying. I've been trying for years. Okay, so I'm gonna ask one more and then I'll wrap us up, and I know everybody's eager to get back to work. So, but what about for an organization who maybe is just starting out on a new or improved, holistic organizational development plan? Is it better for them to spend the time developing out that plan with, a lot of strategy in their, how it's going to build their succession pipeline, et cetera? Or is it good to just get started? You know what I'm asking? Like,
Mhm.
and if so, if it's the latter, what would be your recommendation for how they would just go ahead and start on that?
Well, I'm always from that school that's got a bias for action. I think it was Patton that said, although I'm not sure, you can look it up, but this is a World War II quote, that a good plan violently executed is better than a great plan executed tomorrow. And I've pretty much lived by that it's better to get started, because when you're spending, I do strategic vision for organizations, but when you spend all your time in the conference room thinking about what it's going to be like, the problem with that is once it starts, it's not going to be like what you thought. So I think it's better to get started and be ready to iterate. That said, I'm feel pretty strongly that in almost every case, the best place to start is still with an overall workshop, introduction, let's call it, of the principles of servant leadership, because it gives your organization a common language. It is universal and transcendent. It applies just as much to public safety as it does to internal parts of your organization. It applies to mid-level, upper level, lower level, those principles. And it sort of throws your heart over the fence and makes your body follow. If you're declaring, hey, we want to create a servant leadership culture, then now you're kind of on record for that. And one of the things, I've noticed is that, and I feel embarrassed even saying I thought anything otherwise. And it's not that I did, but it wasn't as clear to me as it is now. SGR doesn't transform anybody's organization. The ones that we've seen be, really transformed, they did it themselves. They did it because they made good decisions at those points where, okay, we can go right or we can go left. They made the right decision. maybe we helped a little bit by giving them an excuse to talk about those things or a time to work on it or pointed out stuff. But you transform your own organization. Everybody that does it, they do it themselves. We're glad to be partners in giving you fuel, giving you tools, maybe giving you, some coaching, but it comes along because leadership at whatever level decides that's where we're going. So it's good to have some plan, but I wouldn't spend so much time planning it out. I would start because I promise you, you're going to iterate and change once you get started going and what you thought, oh, that's really what we need to focus on. After you've done it a little bit, you're saying, maybe it's a little bit this.
Seems kind of like a workout plan, or gym membership or something, you gotta use it, and then you gotta, just get started. You'll see results, and then you'll figure out what works and doesn't work. And
Yeah, for sure. So that said, would love to talk with anybody about, okay, here's where we're at. Can you customize something? Everything we do is customized. So we would be glad to talk with you, strategize with you about, what would be effective and what lots of different tools. We have more tools than you would want to use. But we can maybe help you pick the ones that make the most sense for your organization.
yeah, and I'll say that as well, because it's one of the things I love about SGR, and particularly about working with Mike, is that if you're not sure, or if you have a question about how to structure something, or whatever it may be, honestly, and it's about leadership development, Mike's happy to just have a brainstorming conversation with you, or provide some direction, or connect you with another city who's done the same thing, and you can call them and pick their brain on it, so on and so forth. So I think we want to serve as a resource to you all, and myself as well, although Mike's experience is vast in the leadership development arena, so he's definitely the expert there, but I'm also happy to help if I can. But we want to serve as a resource to you first and foremost. So if there's a way that we can help or provide insight or guidance, or just a recommendation or connection to another city, we want to be that for you. So don't hesitate to contact us anytime. And I'll close this out with a fun HR joke. This one isn't as good as last month, so I'm sorry, but I'm going to try to nail the delivery so that it resonates. Okay, everybody ready? What did the employees say after they received their performance evaluation? Anybody want to guess this one? The employee said, "My boss is so good at finding things for me to improve on." You didn't even laugh, Mike.
I'm not sure I got it.
Yeah, it's not that good. It was kind of like, okay, you would think that HR jokes, you'd think there'd be a ton out there, but most of them aren't that funny. But the one that I did last month was very funny.
Jonathan liked it. There you go.
But it was very funny. I got some laughs out of that one, and people asked me to copy and paste it into the chat, and I did. So it was a good one.
I'm just grateful you didn't tell a joke on me, which those would be funny. Many of them, but
this is the real joke. What? Oh, thanks, Morgan.
There you go, Morgan.
Morgan gets me.
Yeah.
Best joke is who got kicked off of a Southwest flight?
So, if you don't know this story, Chris and I had been working for SGR for several months, but she was living, I think, at the time in Oklahoma, and I was in Dallas. So we had not even met. And then worked out we were flying somewhere. So we get on this plane together and we're just visiting. We're just talking, and we have all this business talk and everything. And the flight attendant, I guess, was trying to talk about how the plane doesn't need to work, and she got so angry with us that I literally thought we were getting kicked off the plane, and that was my introduction to Kristen. So I blamed her; she's blamed me. I mean, we've not really been a very good example of burying the hatchet, but there you go.
That's how it went down. It was Mike's fault. You guys heard it right from the horse's mouth, All right. Well, I'm excited that you joined us today, and I hope that you're able to join us again next month for our HR Collaborative Networking Group meeting. It's a very long title. All right, everybody have a great rest of your week and we'll see you next month.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for your time today.